my name is Richard Corbett from emergebydesign.net, and welcome to my weekly astrological and human design transit report, starting on Monday, May 12th through Sunday, May 18th. Well, as we kick off this week on Monday morning, we have a full moon in Scorpio, and it's also bringing us the channel of structuring, a design of individuality. And the sun in gate 23 is very close to forming its conjunction with Uranus, bringing its quality of surprise, innovation, or change. Now, as we move through the week, we have a lot of individual gates activated through the transits. When this happens, it's also communicating with and stimulating whatever individual gates that we carry in our own personal body graph. So we could find ourselves anywhere on the individual spectrum, from breakthrough, knowing, insights, purpose in life. It stimulates lots of questions that are deep and personal about who I am, why am I here. It's part of the knowing circuitry. But because of that, it also includes the not knowing. That's the other end of the spectrum, where we can find ourselves sometimes in deep, melancholic contemplations, feeling like we just don't know the answers about ourselves right now. So a lot of individuality being stimulated this week. However, in the background, we have Jupiter moving into a sextile with Chiron, the wounded healer. And that'll be growing in intensity until its perfection, which will be exact on Sunday, May 18th. Jupiter, the planet of expansion and good fortune, is lining up in a very favorable position with Chiron in gate 42, the gate of growth and evolution. So it's an interesting week, as you'll see once I get into the charts. But just want to encourage everyone, as we start out with this full moon, there's a lot of emotional energy in the air. But it's all asking us, I think, to really tune in to these deeper questions we have right now. And if we're not clear, that is perfectly normal and part of this cathartic process as we are growing and developing to express our most unique and authentic sense of our truth and how we express that. So let me go ahead and jump into the charts, and we'll look at it day by day. While I'm doing this, I want to thank all of you all for tuning in. Always appreciate the likes and subscribes if you haven't already. I also want to mention that Brandy has been adding somatic tips and tricks in her somatic toolbox to help tune into our body. Our body knows, and it does hold the answers even when we can be confused and in a sense have that not knowing feeling, which some of this energy is generating. Okay, let's take a look here at the chart I have up right now. Is for the full moon in Scorpio. This is happening at 10:55 a.m. Mountain Time. All of my charts are run for Mountain Time, and they are typically run at noon Mountain Time. However, when I do the lunations, such as this chart showing the exact moment of the full moon, these charts, this one you're looking at is for 10:55 a.m. So as I mentioned, when we look at the sun in gate 23 down here in Scorpio, just about 3.5 or so degrees away from Uranus. So we're going to be feeling over the coming days this week, this solar and Uranian energy building until it's conjunct in gate 8, another individual gate I'll talk more about. But certainly for the full moon in Scorpio, it's bringing a bit of electricity into this channel, the 2343, called the channel of structuring, actually named after the circuit group itself, the channel of individuality. The moon traveling through Scorpio, fixed water, is in gate 43, the archetype of breakthrough insights that can be shared with our own individual voice of authenticity through gate 23, the gate of assimilation. Now, 2 weeks ago, we had the new moon in Taurus. And so now here we are 2 weeks later, having the lunar energy give us her full beauty and expression at the time of the full moon. And being in Scorpio, this is the sign of ruled by its modern ruler, Pluto. It's about discovering things that were hidden before, hidden truths and gems that we may have inadvertently not been paying attention to. It's used to being in the dark, this sign. It can almost see into the dark and the plutonic world. And so one of the themes of this week is that we're getting this sense that there may be something that's deep inside of us that wants to express itself. Now, I mentioned the 2343 channel. I also want to tie in that Uranus I mentioned, who's going to be with us in gate 8 for quite a while. Gate 8 is also another individual gate, part of that knowing circuit group, and it's the gate of contribution. So at the time of this full moon, there's just a lot of energy associated with what are we learning about the deepest inner core about who we are. We are living through some very dynamic astrological times, as well as we can see on the world stage how wild it is right now. But I think the charts are still guiding us inwards into who am I becoming as a result of the experiences I'm having right now? And what is my kernel of truth that feels real and authentic? And, it's like life purpose type of question. So if you're feeling those, just want to remind us not to be overwhelmed, not to get caught up in this ajna center, the center of our thinking and conceptualizing and ruminating, because there is a lot of energy for that. And we know that at a full moon, it might even be hard to sleep. So if that happens, just want to come back into our body to use our breathing and connecting with our physical senses. With the sun still in Taurus, we are supported and reminded that Mother Gaia can hold us, and we can ground our feet in the earth, and we can find support there. Now, the modern ruler of Scorpio is Pluto. And Pluto has turned retrograde just about a week ago. So Pluto's barely moving at all, but it is technically retrograde in gate 41, the gate of contraction and decrease, the pressure to start a new cycle of experience. And at the time of this full moon, Pluto is almost exactly only separated by 2 minutes of a degree with Mercury. Mercury is traveling through gate 27 in the body graph, the planet of communication, sharing. Mercury also helps not only us to communicate outward, but Mercury also helps us communicate inward by integrating our personal sun force energy into our body. So with Mercury in gate 27 squaring Pluto, the ruler of the full moon, we're getting the sense that it's very connected, this new cycle of development, to how we're self-nourishing. How are we taking care of ourselves? So important during these times that we don't get so far in front of ourselves or be leaking energy into people or projects that are no longer serving us. I think that Pluto square to Mercury is really pointing us into a frictional element that helps us realize we've got to take care of our body, and self-nourishment, such an important piece to this puzzle. And that's a big part of the symbolism of this full moon in Scorpio. What have we been avoiding? What have we not been looking at or not accepting the truth about our boundaries, our relationships? I also want to add in here, if we think about that new moon where we started this lunar cycle, we had just come off the completion of the Mars opposite Pluto pattern, which had been going on clear back since November. But at the time of the new moon of this cycle, that final third Mars-Pluto opposition had just passed earlier in the day of the new moon. So another reason why this lunar cycle with the sun in Taurus was going to be so much about grounding ourselves with our newfound realizations about what we learned about that cycle, which may have had to do with emotional power dynamics in relationships and how we're standing up for ourselves and also accepting and appreciating the stance of the other person. A lot of dynamic energy I was talking about throughout that period. But again, just reminding us that as we've gone through this lunar cycle and here at the full moon of the luminous emotional expression, we're looking at what have we learned? What can we be grateful for? What's this newfound sense of healing possibly? Because as I mentioned at the very beginning, Jupiter, which is now moving through gate 12 in Gemini, is forming a sextile with Chiron, the wounded healer, which does not get an activation in the body graph software, but it would be in gate 42, which is the gate of growth and part of our cyclical, experiential, emotional cycles of development. So Jupiter being the planet of expansion, forming a very supportive conversation and aspect with our healing process while all this is happening. And again, that particular sextile is going to be growing in intensity until its perfection on Sunday. So yes, I think as we're looking at this full moon and looking back and reflecting on what we've been through, what have we learned? What are the newfound truths of regulating our body within triggering circumstances and how we're able to support our loved ones in our emotional communication? All of that on tap right now. And I think as we move past this full moon and move through the next 2 weeks of the waning phase of this lunar cycle, there's going to be a lot to integrate and again to re-examine our boundaries in order to be self-nourishing for our own sense of spirit. So now let's go ahead and we'll move it into Tuesday. Now, from here on, for the rest of this report, all of these charts are run for noon Mountain Time. So we can see the moon has moved into Sagittarius. So shortly before this noontime chart, about 2 hours prior, the moon would have formed a sextile with that Pluto. So again, as she's moving through Sagittarius, the moon can give us a feeling of emotional optimism, very Sagittarian trait. And touching on that Pluto again could just be that sense of, I've got another chance. So gate 41 is this pressure to have a new cycle of emotional and experiential development. And so the moon here possibly bringing a little bit of optimism. Also, having just moved into Sagittarius, the moon would have trined Neptune in gate 25. Saturn is also in gate 25. I'm actually going to do a special separate report on Saturn and Neptune in gate 25. This is what I'm going to say now is about a much longer term pattern we're engaged in. They're very close. They're moving towards a conjunction. Saturn will move into Aries briefly, but then both Saturn and Neptune are going to go back into Pisces. And so there's this interplay between Pisces and the sign of Aries, as well as gate 25, where they both are now, and gate 36, where they're going to go back to crisis and spirit of the self. And sometimes, it does take some element of friction or change or crisis to actually find the highest truth of the spirit of ourself. And I think Saturn and Neptune are very much involved, and that's a pattern that we're going to be going through all the way till February of 2026. So I'll have more to say about that. But here this week, again, the moon will, during this cycle, moving into Sagittarius, is going to trine not only Saturn in gate 25, but then a few hours after that, Neptune in gate 25. And then also, as we move through, you'll see the trine to Venus as well. But also that Sun-Uranus conjunction is growing every day, and you'll see that every day this is going to get a little bit closer. We still have this channel of structuring. So for the first half of this week, we may be stimulated to share or hear others sharing. Maybe we're searching for our voice of truth and authenticity, or we may be supporting others in that realm as well. And I think it's helpful to know that, again, as we are all being stimulated at this deepest inner core of who we are, to recognize and bring awareness that it's okay to have periods of not knowing. It's part of the process. We can't know patience without knowing impatience. And that's how the knowing circuit group works. We will have moments of breakthrough knowing, but it's coupled with not knowing and melancholy and the muse and sort of that longing for when will my truth of expression come. But it's the patience and awareness to tune out to the outer world and tune in to our voice of truth. So I think that's a big part of the message I'm seeing in the charts this week. And now I'm going to go ahead and move it into Wednesday, May 14th. Now, one of the planetary shifts, Venus is going to move from gate 17 into gate 21 in the ego center. Venus traveling through Aries is the feminine warrior archetype. And here in gate 21, we may be feeling in the transitory field, people wanting to take control. Gate 21 is such an interesting gate. At its heart, it is here to marshal resources with valor and compassion for everyone in the tribe. But at its other end of the frequency, it can feel a bit manipulative in its controlling aspect. So we'll just see how this gets expressed in our experiences this week. But that was one of the shifts happening here on Wednesday. The Sun and Earth are wrapping up their last day in the 2343 channel of structuring. And looking ahead to Thursday, May 15th, we can see that the Sun, still moving through Taurus, has moved into gate 8, putting the Earth in its opposition into gate 14. So the Sun, again, moving into that conjunction with Uranus in gate 8, and the Earth being in gate 14, we can see that we're still in the individual knowing circuit group, and we're still in this center column. So during this period of the year, when the Sun goes through Taurus, this gets reactivated every year. And I think when we have, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have so many individual gates being activated that it's so supportive to be aware of that. So one of the helpful things during this time period is to do some creative work, right? To sink into the not knowing, put on your favorite music, get in your favorite space, and let your imagination fly. Now, I say imagination because part of the individual individual gate also being activated is Neptune and Saturn in gate 25, right? This is a wonderful time to use that Neptunian limitless energy to let your imagination run wild, however that is, however you find creative outlet, whether it's traditional art things like writing or art, painting, drawing, walks in nature, anything that gives you that sense of, this is me, this is what I love, this is the spirit, tasting the spirit of the higher self can be very, again, that is very supported this week. And sometimes due to past issues, trauma, challenges, limitations that we've faced, we may have felt stifled in that expression. You know, the whole world is telling us, do it this way, but yet we want to be doing it our way. And this is part of the growth and development we're in right now. But I really think that Jupiter sextile Chiron energy in the background is giving us some wind in our sails, saying, okay, if there's something from our past that's holding us back, we have the wounded healer in gate 42 urging us into growth and development as we prepare with that plutonic energy in gate 41 to start a new cycle. When we get another chance, if we're here and we're breathing, we're getting another chance to move in that direction. Now, there's some other very conflicting energy going on down here in the astrological wheel. We can see that Jupiter in gate 12 forming that sextile to Chiron in gate 42, but Jupiter is also forming a half square to Mercury, and then the Sun is forming a half square to Venus in gate 21. Now, I don't want to take the time to pull apart each one of those aspects, but just want to say that as that moon is finishing up her tour through Sagittarius, making a square to Saturn at the time of this chart, Thursday just feels like it has conflicting frequencies, right? Little bit hard to tell what's going on, but I can say that from the symbolism here, it's all oriented to looking inward. You know, what am I responding to that I feel empowered by? This is the Earth in gate 14. The archetype of gate 14 of power skills is, how do I feel empowered by my movement into my unique direction? And gate 8, where that Uranus and Sun are, this is the voice of contribution. What is my inspirational, unique contribution to group goals? How am I moving the world forward with my authenticity? So a lot of energy for those types of questions this week. whenever they feel a little overstimulated, which certainly happens, we can feel that overwhelm where we feel lost or just worn down by the events of the world. Right now is a time to find solace, to find physical touch and resources, as I mentioned, that nourishing element that can carry us forward. Speaking of that, I also want to mention, because Mercury was in that gate 27 a few days ago, but as of Thursday, Mercury will move into gate 24. Now here, Mercury is very happy in the Ajna Center, right? They're very closely associated with thinking and communication, which is what our Ajna Center also does. And it's in the gate of return. But the return is part of that individual archetype that I've been speaking so much about. Mercury can kind of get us spinning around and around, getting wrapped around the axle mentally. And while there's great stimulation in our minds right now, to remember to just breathe it out. If we're having that particular issue this week, just to trust and again, find those, use those somatic tools that can take you into your body. And breathing is certainly one of the best ones. So yeah, a little bit choppy water, we might call it on Thursday, but we can remind ourselves that we're over the full moon now. She's heading back home to another lunar cycle in a couple of weeks. So this is a time of integration, and there's energy to take agency, to reorganize now. What have we learned so far this month? What do we feel deep inside to align with our truth? How do we align the outside world to match our inside world? And of course, all of this is about following our own personal authority. And so I always want to remind us that tuning into your center of authority or your process of authority, whatever your personal individual authority is, holding on to that right now can be deeply, deeply illuminating. And these truths of knowing may arise this week. I'm going to take it we're up to Friday, May 16th. Okay. And here again, so the moon is traveling through Capricorn, the sign of structure ruled by Saturn. And so when the moon's in Capricorn, she likes to be, fairly strategic and logical and sort of goal-oriented in that sense. And as you look at the astrological wheel, once again, we can see a lot of different types of aspects. We've got a quincunx to Uranus, a trine to the sun, a square to Venus. So again, those are a lot of different aspects, but underneath all that, I just want to emphasize the steady, slow moving, growing energy of Jupiter-Chiron, right? To again, continually leaning back on whatever soothing, healing tools you have. Or also another element of this Chiron could be that maybe you're teaching other people. Other people may be going through this if you are not, and you have the opportunity to help them, support them, help them learn the beauty and magnificence of them, right? Sometimes we need to hold up the magnificence mirror to our loved ones and remind them how amazing they are. Because with all this individual stimulation, it can be easy to not know that, to forget that, and we can all come together and support each other in that way. And I'm going to move it into Saturday up to May 17th. And we have Mercury. Where did you go? Mercury has still moving through gate 24, as I'd mentioned. The moon will be traveling through gate 61 for the middle part of the day. And so that is what is bringing us in this noontime chart, the channel of awareness, the design of a thinker. But this is the pressure to know my story, the mystery of life, the truth of life. And so this particular aspect on this particular day is very much part of the thematic this week. And also another planetary shift in terms of gate. Mars traveling through Leo has moved into gate 7 and is forming a trine with Venus at 12 degrees Aries, and Venus is still in that gate 21. So Mars trine Venus These are the supportive balancing act between our male archetype and our feminine archetype. But the fact that Venus is in 21 and Mars is in gate 7, we get this sense of, gate 7 is the role of the higher self in interaction and leadership, right? It's this ability to look at the logical patterns and certainly emotional patterns, I would say, based on the recent past, and how can we move forward with a greater sense of improvement or perfection, although perfection is not really attainable, but the idea that we can learn from the past and project and move into the future. And with Mars here, standing strong in this fire sign of Leo, in a communicative, supportive aspect of Venus in gate 21, this could mean that we take hold of our own agency concerning control of our relationships and boundaries and how we're setting them, how we're communicating to others. I'm going through this. I'm having, communication is always paramount in these deeply internally stimulating times. And maybe here we can find a deeper level of communication with our loved ones and help others love us as we learn to love them and support them in their own process as well. We also can see that this sun, I mentioned it in gate 8, they're both at 27 degrees, just about a half a degree apart right now. So we'll be keeping that in our minds. This idea that there could be this, Uranus to me as a planet and an archetype resonates really well with individuality. Individuality is the mutative process of individual creative breakthrough. And that could sound a lot like Uranus: creative, breakthrough, innovative, out of nowhere, sudden, shocking, could cause a revolution if it needs to. So having the sun lining up with Uranus once a year, every year, and it's happening this year in this gate 8, while we're having all these other individual gates and channels activated, I think that's why you can hear me sharing what I am. Deeply stimulating inside here. And again, just want to encourage us to appreciate that. Sometimes those somewhat sleepless nights or the not knowing melancholic phases can really get the best of us, but they are so important for the process. There's a percolating, a mutative cauldron bubbling right now where pieces of our story may emerge right now. So really, really wonderful and supportive in terms of that process. And finishing up here, Sunday, May 10th, yet another individual gate activated. What's happened is Mercury, still traveling through Taurus, has moved into gate 2, the gate of higher knowing, bringing us the entire channel called the channel of the beat, a design of the keeper of keys. Archetypally, this is our life force sacral's energy ability to respond in a self-empowered way to our own higher knowing sense of creative direction. That's kind of a mouthful. But again, just another layer into the story I've been sharing. We also on Sunday at this noontime chart, the moon was just conjunct with Pluto in the morning hours, still stimulating that plutonic depth of finding the hidden truths that were a result of the full moon. At this point here, Sunday, almost a week past the full moon on Monday, and we'll be approaching the third quarter moon. Well, I will kick off next week's report with the third quarter moon, but certainly at this stage, we're only a week away of the next new moon. And so there may have been a lot of things coming up from the dark, the hidden recesses of who we are that we can take a look at and observe and integrate and find that connection, that sense of purpose and peace, and our signature with whatever type you may be in human design. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I want to thank you all so much for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a great full moon, everybody. Bye for now.